Then to say like, okay, so and who deserves these resources? That's also just based on stories we're telling. So I was like, if I can get up in there and tell more stories specifically with Black women in them, like that'll make such a difference in ways that I don't even really fully understand. I also saw the timing as like God being like, here is a way out. And so with not even, I hadn't even applied to it yet, but just this one little indicator from God that like, you're not out here floating alone in space when you decide to take a leap. Like, I've got you. One thing I noticed is, so I've got this coaching Instagram and I've been growing it for a few months. And I noticed that I had a video, I had one of the reels that I put out went kind of viral. And so I would like open up my Instagram account and it would be like 100 likes, 50 follows, not 50 follows, but just like huge numbers. And that really scared me. And I was like, oh, there's something here around being seen.
Greetings all and welcome back to Living Once Twice, the place where we rewrite narratives, reinvent ourselves, and reimagine our lives. I'd like to thank you all for tuning in to today's episode. Before we dive in, please be sure to follow us on Instagram at Living Once Twice. Also, don't forget to like, subscribe, share, leave us a comment on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube as well, especially as it relates to our guests, like the amazing guest that I'm going to bring on in a little bit. I am very excited to bring on today's guest, Chimdi Ihezie. Chimdi is a digital creator, child of God, creative coach, and you can follow Chimdi's evolution on her YouTube channel, where she shares authentic insights regarding content creation, self-love, healing, and spirituality. You could also get involved and learn more about Chimdi's creative coaching if you are interested in following her at Coaching by Chimdi as well. Chimdi, welcome to the show. How are you?
Thank you for having me. I'm doing incredible. Even better now that I'm talking to you.
Even better, and hopefully what's your grade on how I pronounce your last name, by the way? B
I'd
plus?
say 8 to 9 out of 10.
Oh, okay, 8 to 9. All right, I'll take that.
That's
I
pretty
will
good.
take
Yeah.
that. I got a little bit of the
That's
preview of the
rigorous.
coaching. I got a little preview of that coaching that folks can expect from you. So Jimmy was very supportive of me before we hit record. So I appreciate that. A little insight there. So highly recommend. I love it. So, Chinny, before we dive into just the amazing story, your insight that you have to share with our listeners, I want to give folks a little bit of background context of how I came to learn about your work, where about a year ago, I and about 214,000 others seen your video. I quit my job without having another one lined up. And for me, that really resonated during the season I was in, during the career crossroad that I was in. Your journey at that time and what you were sharing in that video spoke to me. And we're definitely going to talk about that. But however, following the rest of your journey and everything that you talk about, from healing and spirituality and self-love and relationships, it's also resonated with me, and I know so many others. And so I'm really excited to have you on, because you are such a role model to all of us and what it means to live in your purpose, but then also to surrender yourself to faith, God, universe, whatever it might be, kind of just the divineness out there. So I just want to thank you for just kind of taking on that responsibility, whether you wanted it or not, because you are really leading the way. And like I said, role modeling for so many of us on what it means to just step into our purpose and own our authentic voice.
I really appreciate that. I mean, it is very strange because that's not at all what I thought I was doing when making that video. And it's very humbling to consider that that's the kind of impact the video has had. And it is also affirming to me that we don't really know, just the amount of impact our choices can have. And so to remain committed and focused, just step after step, day after day, and then you'll have people letting you know how much of a difference you made in their lives. So yeah, I'm just very humbled.
You're segueing into where I actually want to begin, Chimney, because there's a lot of directions I want to take today's conversation. I want to talk about everything from career. I want to talk about relationships and friendships. I also want to talk about your creative coaching work and what you do to support people in that endeavor. But you were just talking about like choices. And one of the choices I want to talk about is in that video, you talked about choosing courage over comfort. So I want to share a quote that hopefully will help folks who are not familiar with your story learn more about your journey. And so to start things off, I want to go and learn more from you about this quote, which is, I didn't want to admit to myself that I was not strong enough to live a life that matched my values. So I pretended that the values my life did expose were the actual truth. So Chimdi, as it relates to your story, can you take us back to that time in your life and who you were back then, and then how that kind of led to your decision to quit your job?
Yeah, for sure. So when I think about that quote, I think about the way that there are sort of a set of values, whether it's from your family, your culture, from media, wherever else, where we all agree that like those are the good ones to have and those are cool and those are okay. And so even if you know that you personally have other elements of your life that are way more important and or resonate with you far deeper or are way more connected to your purpose, if you aren't ready yet to actually lean in because of fear, which was my experience, it's easier to just say, well, everyone agrees that education is important, and everyone agrees that leadership is important, and everyone agrees that teachers should play a role in education policy. And like, so the work that I used to do supported educators in getting involved in public policy because of a lot of policy is not made by people who have classroom experience. And that's something that I definitely agree with. Like, you can't disagree with that, right? And it's important. And I totally am glad I spent those years supporting leaders in getting those roles. But when I think about what ultimately like makes my heart sing and makes me excited to live my life and gets me up in the morning and like what I would just talk about for fun and do for fun and do for free, that wasn't it. Like that was a job. And the like I didn't have a lot of experience with people who made the choice, which I do think is a very courageous choice, to say, I may not know exactly where money's going to come from. I may not exactly see the path for how this will lead to my material success, but this is what's on my heart. And so I'm going to make the choice to commit to that. And so I didn't have a lot of models of that. I had models of people, having a pretty tough set of circumstances and surviving and making it work despite those circumstances. And I admired that and I appreciated that. And I'm the product of that. So to me, I saw that it's a beautiful thing to put your family first. It's a beautiful thing to put, having food on the table first. Those things help you get by. And I walked with that for a while because um, it's just really hard to step into the unknown if you don't have any practice doing it. And I think I built up these muscles of practice and really I shouldn't say they're small because when you're doing something that you're scared of, it's terrifying or whatever it is. So one of the things I did before quitting my job was get elective eye surgery. And like people who have glasses, don't have perfect vision, who have thought about eye surgery, it's scary to think about an elective surgery that could maybe make you blind, which PRK does not do, by the way. But you have all the fear, and so you're like, ugh. And that was something that I was like, you know what? I think it's going to be all right. I'm going to face this fear. I'm going to do it. And then I experienced that, and I experienced the beauty and the blessing on the other side. And I was like, okay, this is doing scary things is worth it when you feel really good about your odds, essentially. And so I just kept doing little small things, shaving my head bald, like just things where I was like, I think I've got the cheekbones for this, like I think the math's on my side for this one. And I think I just built this muscle of doing scary things. So by the time it came to quitting my job, I felt like, okay, let me make a list of all the things I have going for me, whether it's like the resources I have with my family and my friends and people who will let me crash on their couch if I can't pay rent, to my actual resume and my actual skill set and my talents and my ability to network and make connections. Like I may not know specifically where the money will come from and what I will do, but I know I've got enough to make it work. And I have the faith that it's gonna be okay because I've seen time and time again how it has been okay. And I've experienced in so many ways how things that I couldn't have imagined ended up blessing my life in so many incredible ways. So I was like, I think this is going to be one of them. And worst case scenario, LinkedIn is always there, and I can always apply to another job. So I never. It was very unknown and it was very scary, but I know a lot of that fear was just internal fear and not matched to the reality of the world.
Jim, this is a powerful start to things, and I want to uplift a lot of the areas that you touched on. First and foremost, where many of us, we have like a survival mentality, whether it be our upbringing or culture, what's kind of going on around us and those impacting us, where we don't think too much about the life outside of the comfort zone and can we explore it and how safe it might be. We just kind of go back to like that Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We need our security, we need our food, we need our shelter, and that kind of limits our bubble of how the endless possibilities for our lives. But then you talked about just almost trying to figure out like, okay, well, what would resonate with me if fear wasn't at play here? What would I do? What would light me up? What would bring me joy? What would I do for free? And even hearing you talk about that, you lit up like a Christmas tree. And so for you to find your way to shore and kind of leaning into that, that speaks so much volumes. And you talked though, but it's not easy. It doesn't happen overnight. It's a process. and you went through different things like the laser eye surgery and shaving your head to kind of build up your resilience muscle and then take the leap. So I think it's important for people to know that it was almost like there was some intentionality and strategicness in this. You didn't just decide to just up and leave per se. You kind of built yourself up to it. So yeah, what
Well,
were
I
you gonna say?
also want to say that, it's always easy to create a story and a narrative on the other side of something, right? So this is the
Mm,
story I've decided to tell, right?
okay.
With my current level of consciousness and awareness and context. I'm like, I think this is what happened. So give it another 5 years, I could be telling a completely different story about how it all led up. And while I was in it, I didn't see it that way. I didn't see it as like, I remember the moment where I shaved my head because I there's like levels to like how low you can go. And I remember I went one level and I was like, and after you do the initial scary thing, you kind of your nervous system regulates. And I was like, ooh, I kind of want to feel that thrill again. And so I like went one level lower. And so there was a part of me that kind of knew like there's this thrill that's like the leading edge of my experience that if I'm willing to like dance with that leading edge and maybe take it a little bit further, there'll be things that are just beyond anything I've experienced before that I'm going to get to like experience for the first time. So I think that was the only kind of conscious awareness. But I honestly think a lot of it is sort of, and this is something I realized after spending so long in the education nonprofit space, and you meet people and you have to tell them your story about how it was that you came to working at a leadership education nonprofit, that now that I work in a creative space and with coaching, I now have a different story where I take the same sort of facts and experiences and I turn it around to say something different about my journey. So I just want to add that caveat that all of this is true and it's based on like my current perception and my current context, and truly it could change in 2 weeks.
I see what you're saying. So like you're saying, like looking back, this is kind of what it sounds like. But in that moment, all right. So share with me a little bit more then too. Like during that moment of going through this, trying to build up your resilient muscle, but you still have to show up to maybe a job that's not bringing you to life. Like what is going on in your mind? Are you like you feeling like a lot of stress? Are you feeling like a little bit scared? Like what are people going to think of me if I do end up quitting my job? Like what are some of the things that are going on in your mind during that time?
Well, and I do talk about this on my YouTube as well, which is how much self-medicating I was doing because a lot of it was a sort of this was like during pandemic times, right? So to have a job and to not be laid off, to have a job where it was already remote, so there wasn't this transition to learning how to work from home. Like there were a lot of things to be really grateful for, and there was a level of guilt about like I shouldn't feel like it wasn't a bad job either. Like so many people as a result of that video have told me stories about like horrible abuse and just mistreatment and all these really, all these terrible conditions that they had to go through. And that wasn't my experience. It was just that the job wasn't aligned for me. And there were specific things in terms of like I took on more work than I should have when another team member left, which I think is a very common thing that happened during the pandemic. Um, and for I didn't advocate for myself for like any kind of pay raise or anything, even though it was way more work, even though I knew that wasn't right. So there were like things like that, but I felt, and I think this is also part of my makeup, where I do look to see the brighter side and I do try to see, well, how is this actually for my growth and for my best interest? So I could actually see how like this isn't that bad of a gig, girl. So it was hard for me to sort of look at the facts and be like, this what you have to do your work, to send these emails and have these calls is not physically difficult. It's not hard. If anything, it's a cushy gig and yet you're still unhappy. And so that cognitive dissonance inside myself was pretty hard to sit with because I knew, and this is something I've learned as a result of like my healing and spiritual journey, I knew that for something to be unclear, it meant that I wasn't ready to see the truth of what was going on. And I wasn't obviously ready. And so I did a lot of like smoking weed, a lot of self medicating because I was just like, it was just real. I was just really unhappy, really like suffering and struggling. And there's a lot of internal, like, dissonance and disconnect and didn't really know what to do. And I'd never quit a job without having another one lined up. And actually, I don't think I talk about this a lot, but I had a former coworker who actually worked for like a big four consulting firm, and a lot of the people who worked at that nonprofit went and worked at that same consulting firm. So I was like, okay, I need to have some kind of exit strategy. And so literally right after like a moment of prayer where I told God, like, listen, God, I need your help. Like I'm ready to stop driving this car. Like, what you got for me? Literally like moments after that prayer, this person texted me and was like, hey, I know because we had talked a few months ago, and I said, I knew then, I was like, I don't care about this. I don't care about this. I would only be doing this for a check, and I know I won't be happy, and so I dipped. And then he texted me in that moment and was like, "Hey, we actually have this new initiative that's all about diversity, equity, and inclusion, blah blah blah. And I can send you this, this report we just wrote." And I read the report, and the report really resonated. And I also saw the timing as like God being like, "Here is a way out." And so, with not even, I hadn't even applied to it yet, but just this one little indicator from God that, like, you're not out here floating alone in space when you decide to take a leap. Like, I've got you, is what literally the next morning I gave my notice after having this conversation with this person. And I tell you, a week later, I applied for that role and they followed up swiftly to be like, no, girl, you're not a good fit. But that's all I needed, was just something, just any little thread to hold on to. And God gave it to me in the form of that random text. So I think that that's also a part of it too, is that just knowing that it was possible to get another job and that I had
Mhm.
connections in these fancy places was good for me.
This whole aspect of like leaning into faith, even if you're kind of dipping your foot out there and saying, okay, there's a stone, there's something there as you're making your way through the fog. You've talked about this then because we know we're in this period of the great resignation where many people are probably feeling this way of, I'm taking on all this additional work but not being compensated for it, or there is this disconnect between the work that I'm doing and how aligned it is with my values. I'm just wondering, for people out there, professionals out there who are maybe in that space, like, what would you share with them of things they need to consider or think about before they quit their job? Is there anything additional you would offer to them?
I think it comes down to, because I think there's levels of the logistics and the more like practical, like, do you have savings and do you have family and do you have certain skill sets and things like that. But I think it comes down to like, what is your inner resourcing? Because um at that point I hadn't begun, I'm in this like 2-year trauma healing program now. So at that point, I didn't have that, but I'd been doing a lot of reading and researching around, like, healing and spirituality and all these different things. And so I was growing the muscle of faith, and I was growing the muscle of like, life isn't happening to me. Like, I'm playing an active role in my life. I'm an active creator in my life. And if I choose to have a different kind of life, it's possible. Like, I'm not a helpless person. And I think part of why we go along with situations that demean us and disempower us and make us feel less than is because we have a sneaking suspicion that we're less than and we're not powerful. And so our external world is mirroring what we kind of deep down feel. And so I think doing the internal work of like unpacking any of your limiting beliefs around, do I deserve to have more money? Do I deserve to have a job that I love? And if there's parts of you that say, that whisper, like, actually, no, you don't, spending time with those parts of yourself, because those are the parts that have experienced really tough, difficult things, that said, because I do believe that we're born knowing our greatness and we're born in our full light and we're born in our full purpose. And then we we encounter people and situations, people who are hurt, right? Who say and who act out their own stuff on us. And that makes us wonder, like, oh wow, I feel like I'm a great kid and I'm like a good person, but like my parents aren't really around, or even worse, they really beating my ass. But I really feel like I don't think I deserve this. But then if it happens enough times, you're like, am I a piece of shit? Like maybe, So I think, and that's really tough, right? To do the inner work. And for me, it's meant a lot of weeping. So, it's not a light task to choose to walk your own path and to choose to sort of presence what's happened to you and let it go. But it's the process of, or I'd say it's because we are holding on to the stuff that made us feel terrible, that we then keep re-encountering situations that make us feel terrible, because we have to, I believe, face those things and release them in order to sort of change our story and introduce the possibility of a different outcome. So I guess it would just be summed up in like, do inner work and do a lot of weeping.
Mm. So let's go there, because I really like what you were just talking about, this kind of victim consciousness many of us have, that we've allowed the imprints from the outside world to just have such an ear hustle on our mentality, on our mindset, that we don't understand how powerful we indeed are. Beyond just the physical bodies, we're something spiritual, and there's just limitless potential we have. But we've lost that for so many reasons. And you talked about your healing journey being like a 2-year process. So like, what were some of the other either programs or narratives that you had to work through in your healing journey to get back to reclaiming your power?
Well, I mean, it seems like now it's literally like every single day. There's
Okay.
some really intense process that I go through around some element of my journey. So the one that happened literally last night was around trust and hope. And so I'm currently in the 2-year program and we're halfway through because it's February, we're recording this. So yeah, we still have like the rest of 2023 to go. And the leader of the program is a white European man. And when we think about race, if there's one group that we should be a little bit suspicious of, it's them white European men, y'all. They've been acting up. And so
So you went
to
into
me,
that program, I'm sure, with like a side eye of like, wait, I'm supposed to be learning from you how to heal my trauma?
listen. So to and this wasn't like I sought this out, right? Like I was minding my business and a friend sent
Okay.
me one of his videos. And it just really resonated with me. But and so this is a separate thing I learned was all around like authority and around there's certain people who not even certain people, I think in general, I'm very like sort of distant towards authority figures where I'm like, they really need to prove themselves to me. And I enter organizations with this attitude of for the leadership of like, make it clear to me why you're in charge. And until I'm clear, I'm not going to just blindly follow whatever it is you say. And that comes from trauma. So I did some unpacking of that. And then last night I spent some time with this this fear around hope. And I realized that there's a very young part of me that for very wise reasons, after kind of hoping and wanting certain things and trusting, realized like, oh, like that's not going to end well. Like my hopes are not going to be met. And I have this theory that how we feel about God is how we feel about our fathers. And my dad like worked really, really hard. And I'm one of 6 kids, but that meant that there would be times where he would make promises and he just logistically couldn't keep them. And even small things like when you're the last kid in kindergarten waiting to get picked up and you see one
Mm.
by one all the other kids get picked up. It's just like these small, subtle things that are like, oh, everyone else is getting picked up. Like, where's my dad? It's very like vulnerable and so as a result, to sort of be able to survive these like intense emotional experiences, I built up this wall that said, you know, we can hope, but it was a very small part of me. Like it was the imagery that came up was like me in this like small in this cave, and far out in the distance, I see a distant light of like the surface, and I was able to spend time with that young part of me and realize that she still had hope and she was still looking up and seeing it, but it was just really far away, and knowing that I'm not ready yet to fully hope and fully trust in some of these people and some of these institutions and some of these dreams because there are lots of things I want to do, lots of experiences I want to have, and the fear of wanting them and hoping for them and it not happening, it's actually the chance that I would try for something and not get it in some instances is too great. So I'd rather actually continue to stay small. So even though I had this video and it went viral and it's impacted people's lives, it's not as if that part of my journey is over where I'm like now done with like fear and taking leaps of faith and stepping out in courage. Like it's still this ongoing process for me.
Jimmy, I really resonate with the aspect of you talking about how this is a journey, and just because I'm a year, 2 years out, it doesn't mean that I still don't have the inner child stuff that creeps up, that pops up. And I kind of want to hear you talk a little bit more, because some people are like, wait, I gotta go on a 2-year journey of this. Like there's no, like I could do a 6-week program and be healed. Are there some signs for someone who's wanting to go on a healing journey to know like, okay, you're starting to turn the corner? Because you could get discouraged real quick if you think you've dealt with something and it creeps back up and then you're like, well, maybe I haven't healed that. But are there some signs that you've seen or observed that can help someone know like, yo, you're on the right track? Like, don't stop going, keep going.
Well, I think it's right to be discouraged because it's
Okay.
an endless journey. I still haven't fully grasped that I will be like 89 on
Mm.
my deathbed, still having insights like, oh, I just realized something. And then I'll have a heart attack and die. I'm like, I never get to just be chilling that whole time. So that is something to wrap your mind around, is that we will never stop healing. We'll never stop growing. But I think what's really, really beautiful, and I think why it's worth it, is because you do have all of this greater context and your life gets bigger and you become more expansive. You have more impact as you heal and as you grow. And the situations that used to knock you out won't knock you out, and it'll be things that are like small. Like I was the kind of person who, if I took a flight, like it made me uncomfortable to like, if I was sitting in the middle row, to like ask the person next to me, like, hey, do you mind like moving? So I like literally like, and that's like a subtle thing. And I think maybe women experience that maybe more, but just small ways of like asserting my needs became uncomfortable. And then I was riding in an Uber the other day, and the window was down. I was a little cold, and I was like, "Hey, can you raise up the window?" And then you raise up the window, and that's like a simple thing, but like our life is made up of these like little moments where we either speak up and say what we want, or we don't, and our life is either a little bit better or a little bit worse because of it. And then life is just that magnified by 100 times. So there are these subtle, simple ways where you have more capacity. But then one thing I noticed is, so I've got this coaching Instagram and I've been growing it for a few months. And I noticed that I had a video, I had a one of the reels that I put out went kind of viral. And so I would like open up my Instagram account and it would be like 100 likes, 50 follows, not 50 follows, but just like huge numbers. And that really scared me. And I was like, oh, there's something here around being seen. So I did some process work around that. And then I had another video do just as well. And then instead of it scaring me when I saw those numbers, and instead was like exciting, and if anything, it was like normal. So you'll come into more situations in your life where you can handle it, where it's fun, where it's easy. And the things that used to really freak you out, such as crying in public or crying at all, become things that become normal and commonplace. And like, I've got a YouTube video out where I'm like weeping on there, which is like the first time I've done that seriously. So yeah, you just will see your life become more and more beautiful. And it is, I think, hard, especially in the beginning. But after you kind of start seeing the difference in your life, you'll see that it's worth it.
So now you were starting to talk about like how in your self-love journey, in your healing journey, it sounds like you're becoming more and more comfortable in your own skin. And I think for some of us, it's like, okay, a part of that journey is you shed the old programs, the old narratives, and you start to become more comfortable in your new skin. And you spoke a couple of times about crying. And so I want to hear more about, like, I guess your journey of I guess
My
becoming more
relationship
comfortable
to
doing that.
weeping.
Yes. Yes, because it's a positive thing to do. I know for males, it's like we don't cry, but it's so toxic for us to hold that emotion in. So
Mhm.
how have you started to reframe, or I guess embrace that emotional part of your healing and expression, crying?
Well, I think the hardest thing for me, well, so the program I'm in, and I think in general, a really beautiful way to consider healing is we sometimes want to demonize our coping mechanisms and say that they're bad. We want to change them. But instead, they speak to our power and our ability to do what we need to do to survive. And so, what I realized for myself in terms of crying is that I learned at a certain age that crying out wouldn't mean that my needs would get met. Because as babies and as as children, like that's all we kind of have, especially for pre-verbal. All we've kind of got is our crying, and we hope that like gets the attention we need. And so if we keep crying out, and no one comes, like obviously that's not that's not going to work. So we have to start getting smart about, okay, what's some other ways we can get our needs met, right? And so when I first realized that, one, it's like an incredible thing to be able to not express something that's like as powerful as like a cry out, to be like, "Ugh," like to like just sort of bring that in is a really powerful thing to have the ability to do. First, of course, it really made me very sad to think about a young, adorable baby version of me crying out and not being comforted. So that was really intense. But then, sort of being able to presence, like, oh wow, like that's a reflection of my strength. And then the next level for me was realizing like, oh, I used to associate crying with with self-soothing, with having to take care of myself and have my own needs met. So not having so many memories of like crying out and then someone being like, oh, you're okay, you're okay. Like I don't have a lot of those memories of being soothed. So when the threat of tears used to come up, it would bring that sort of panicky fear feeling of like, oh shit, like I've got to tamp this down.
Mm.
So like going through that layer of like, oh wow. and then being in a healing community where I could just cry and like a stranger would just like hold me as I wept it out, which is very radical still to me. Um, so that was really beautiful. And then I'd also be so the way my coping mechanism was to become very charming and to be very likable and very, very personable. And that's a great coping mechanism to have because our society really, elevates and values those kinds of skills. But it meant that there was a lack of vulnerability that I would have in my relationships and in my content that I created. And there's a level of people appreciating charm and personality and fun and all these things. But ultimately, because we're full people, we like it when we see the other sides of someone's expression. And those sides I was so uncomfortable with showing. And I had to have people affirm again and again and again, like, Chimdi, you're it's even more beautiful when you are vulnerable and when you are expressing yourself. Like, that's even better than the version of you that's all cheery and bright. And I was just like, it took a long time for that to really seep in. And I think in part because there was still so much pain associated with actually expressing those feelings. So I think it worked in tandem that, like, as I got more support with crying and it became less of this thing um, that meant my needs aren't being met. And also having the process tools where if you aren't really able to get to like the root of what's going on, the crying is almost cyclical. Like, it's like the same tears almost
Mhm.
again and again and again. So by being equipped with the actual tools of like, okay, let's actually get to the root of what's going on here. And let's actually be witnessed by someone. Let's actually get some true co-regulation. And let's actually learn how to, like, just like dig in and weave in of like, oh, what am I actually really crying about? And how can I bring some light to that situation? I think having one physical like comfort and support and witnessing, and then having those tools made it so that I was able to actually access that more and more. And things like the I Quit video that was so genuinely uncomfortably vulnerable for me, like to the point where I didn't even like rewatch it for a while after making it. Um, and then having that be so successful also felt like God being like, yeah, girl, when you are vulnerable, you will be rewarded. And one of the last meeting we had in person for this retreat I'm in, I spoke to the leader of the program, and it's very scary. The thing about trauma healing, which is so freaking annoying, is that I thought that I was doing a good job with my front, with my, the
Mm.
mask I had created. And that man saw right through it. And anyone who has done their healing work will see right through someone's mask. And it's so freaking annoying. And so he like glanced at me and he was like, so Chimdi, you're doing this sparkly, charming personality thing and we love it and it's great. But when you're able to accept real love and support, you're gonna have even more impact. And I was just like, ugh. He was like, does that resonate? And I was like, it does. And so that's really further sort of recommitted me to like allowing in that vulnerability, allowing in that support, allowing in that love. And it's made my life so much richer and have way more depth. So that's why I'm such a fan of weeping. But as I speak about it, as I've been walking my path, I realize that I'm probably not the only one who has that, but that's my specific path where it's been about letting myself express my emotions more and be supported in the expression of those emotions.
And and just hearing you talk about that, Jimmy, that's like the wonderful thing about you being so open and vulnerable about sharing your story is that we get to watch you evolve as you continue to unlock these new levels, or as you were just sharing, getting to the root level of things and you're unearthing it. It does come out in your content and what you do. And I want to talk about and kind of pivot to talking about your content creation journey and what you also do with your coaching. So can you just kind of walk us through like what sparked you to create your own YouTube channel and how has your content evolved as you've evolved yourself?
Well, I could talk about it from the sense of like, I'm like, I went on a natural hair journey and I saw the YouTube videos with the natural hair girlies, and I was like, I could be one of them, blah, blah, blah. So that's one level of it. But actually, as I've been walking with it, the deeper level was wanting attention. Like, I wanted people to, like, I thought I was great and my life didn't reflect it. Like, people weren't constantly affirming me the way I needed to be constantly affirmed. And so I was like, how are we gonna fix this situation? And this is all happening subconsciously. But I was like,
Mm,
what are we gonna do about this? And I was like, you know what? I'm gonna put out some YouTube videos of me being great and helpful and pretty. And then people will leave comments and they'll be like, you're great and helpful and pretty, and we love you. And that's exactly what happened. So that's like the short version is, oh, it was trauma. Like, and that's also the thing where like whenever you It's like when you buy a car and you see that same car everywhere. I'm in a trauma healing program, so I see trauma everywhere. But I do
Ah.
think that was one level, was like, oh, I need some affirmations. And so I created content that fed that. But then on another level, it was, of course, um, really loving media, really loving stories. And when I think about the way I made it through a lot of the tougher parts of my childhood, it was just getting lost in movies and TV shows and being online. And I know the way that's really influenced me in my direction. And so I love the idea of being a part of the culture and being a part of shaping culture, because one thing I also felt when I worked at that education nonprofit is like a lot of the ways we assign resources. One, the idea that resources are limited in the first place is about trauma and about stories we're telling. But then to say like, okay, so and who deserves these resources? That's also just based on stories we're telling. So I was like, if I can get up in there and tell more stories specifically with Black women in them, like that'll make such a difference in ways that I don't even really fully understand. So there was a sort of deeper purpose around wanting to shift the culture and being a part of it, and knowing that I did have the power. Like I had a lot of self efficacy as a young person, where I was like, yeah, I can make changes. Like I know how to buy a camera and learn how to do these things, and like I was very savvy with technology as a kid. So I was like, I can figure this out. Um, and then, yeah, genuinely, I did learn a lot from natural hair YouTube, and I was like, I can make videos as good or better that are also very helpful for people. And so,
Mm.
and that's still something I think about. Like, I'm thinking about a hairstyle now, and I did a bunch of research, and I was like, I don't see the specific tutorial that I want, and I can create it, so I'm going to make it. Um, so yeah, so that's kind of like where the maybe the origination sort of started from. And then I do think just in general, being creative, I think, is just what we're here to do. I think that's the nature of being alive. I think that that is God energy, is
Mm.
creative energy. And I feel like I saw how painful it can be when in my own experience and in my family experience, when we aren't really given the resources or the opportunities to really be in our full creative expression. So it also feels like it's an important thing to do, to just be a creative person, and that's actually what allows you to be excited about your life. Because if all you've got kind of going for you, what you spend most of your time doing is like a job that you hate or whatever, like you're gonna be like it's depressing. Like your energy is literally being depressed, and that means that there's less life, there's less vitality, and then everyone is worse off for it. um so yeah, that's kind of been like the initial start and what's kind of kept me going. And then yeah, it's just so much fun, and it is the kind of thing where I did want to make money from YouTube, but I was going to do it anyway, and I was doing it before I was making any money. I was like, yeah, I just want to make little videos. Like it's fun, learning about camera angles and throwing a filter on something. It's just a good time. And we and I believed, and I want others to also believe that we deserve to do things that are fun. Like that's
Mm.
actually, I think, the point.
Oh, that's a point that you're making so clear throughout this is like, as you get in touch with who you are authentically, you got to live that. You got to walk that. You can't delegate it, minimize it, compromise on that. Otherwise, you're not going to live a fully authentic and joyful life. And Jimmy, I want to go back to you talking about the aspect of being a voice for what you weren't seeing. And you were comfortable being out there in front of the camera and putting yourself out there. However, you know that there are creators out there who maybe want to be you, but they fear being judged. They think no one's going to listen. So what would you offer to them who are a little bit hesitant on leaning into faith and putting themselves out there, but they know that this would bring so much joy, so much fulfillment to them. They feel like this would be a part of their purpose, but they fear being judged, or like, oh, there's so many people in the space, like who's going to listen to me? What would you say to
Well,
that?
yeah, well, first off, of course, don't try to be me because there's only one me and I'm doing an incredible job at it. So definitely just try to be you because that's the only thing you can do anyway. But one thing I've realized in my healing journey is that the only way to make progress is to accept where you are now, is to just be with where you are now. So I think the first thing would be to, like, if you are feeling that discomfort, it's really uncomfortable. Of like, I really don't like that everything I create is fake as shit, or like I can't
Mm.
create at all. It's like it's so painful to want and to yearn to be this other person, to have this other kind of life, but I really, really want it and I'm not there. I think the first thing truly is just to pause and to be like, I am not where I want to be, and really let yourself feel the deep discomfort, maybe the sadness, the anger, the grief, the pain, the shame, the guilt of, I want to be there and I'm here instead. And what I'm realizing is that like every truth is true on like 10 million different levels, right? And so for myself, when I think about, this is something I realized in terms of my like I used to do a bunch of travel and cool stuff like that. I mean, I still do, but that used to be really a big part of my life, was doing a lot of like international travel. And part of it came from this place of like, right here in my body, this is uncomfortable to be here. So I got to go somewhere else. And then it manifested in like, here in my state of Maryland is uncomfortable. I got to go to a different place. Here in my job is uncomfortable. I got to do a different job. So it was the same actual um, compulsion, maybe, that was just repeating itself in every area of my life, which is like, right here isn't good. Over there will be better. And so I think as I got that inner resourcing and I was able to like, yeah, just be literally more in my body, then every area of my life started to match it. Where it's like, actually, I really like my job. I really like doing YouTube. I really like doing coaching. Maryland is kind of cool. Like it's a lot of
Mm.
peace. There's a lot of nature. Like in all areas of my life, it started to match. Like, oh wait, I can actually be here. My personality, my emotionality, all of this. It's actually pretty dope. So I think the process of being able to accept where you are right now and to process how hard it is to be where you are, that process of releasing that fear and anger and grief and sadness and shame, whatever else, will then give you the energy and the resources and the sight and the context and the space to be like, oh, this is one thing I can do differently to change my situation. Because right now, it seems as if like, how will I get there? What will I do? And it seems like the answers aren't there, but all of the answers are literally right in front of us. But there's very wise reasons why we don't see them. And it's through the process of like feeling these things and releasing them that we get that sight back.
I love it. I love that hero's journey aspect of it, of like, as you go through this process of loving yourself, healing yourself, even if you end up right back to start, you end up different. You've got all these insights, these perspectives. You're not taking your old baggage and you're
Mhm.
kind of owning it and you're putting it to use. And you've shown so many different creative ways that you've done that in your own journey, Chimney.
Yeah, it's
So,
exactly as you said, where you, because I think that's literally the whole spiritual journey, is that we think where we are is bad. Like we think the world is bad, we think our life is bad, we think our job is bad, we think everything is bad, and we're like, I got to do something about it. And then we go on a whole journey to be like, oh wait, I'm good, God is good, life is good,
mm,
things are good. And when before you go through the journey, you're like, I cannot believe that is true. Things are so terrible. It's like impossible. And then when you go on the journey, you're like, oh wait, this is awesome. And it's a blessing to be on the other side, knowing, of course, that it's an endless journey.
yep, lifelong. So now we'll get into our each one teach one section. So these are just 4 rapid fire questions that I've got for you, Chimney. So are you ready for the first one?
Please.
All right, here we go. So the first one is, what's one book that you would recommend that has been impactful for you in your healing journey?
So I would say the book Conversations with God by Neale Donald Walsh. I think the title, especially for people who have religious trauma, it might scare some people away, but I think it was one of the most radical spiritual books I've read, and it really connected to parts of me that I guess this isn't rapid if I'm still
No,
going
no,
on,
no. This is good.
but
It's like a whole series. Like I haven't
yeah,
opened it up
it's
yet,
like
but
3
like,
books. So start with
yes.
the first one, give it a
Okay.
taste. But I think especially if you grow up in like a Christian context, there's a lot of
Mm,
stuff that you hear it and you're like, I don't know if this makes sense, but I don't want to burn in hell. So let me just keep it pushing.
mm,
And I think the book does a good job of like connecting to our innate knowingness and my innate knowingness that my God is a good God. So
mm.
I'd recommend that book.
Love it. Love it. Love it. Well, I can't wait to dive in. I'll be sure to add that to the show notes. So, what's a habit or practice, Chimney, that has been impactful for you in your lifestyle design?
It's gotta be meditation, and I think people say it all the time, and there's a resistance, and I think sitting with the resistance to sitting down quietly. Like, what is so bad about sitting still? And the more you are able to be with that, like, "Ooh, this is uncomfortable," the more space you'll have to then have the energy to do all the other things you want in your life. But it starts with being able to just sit still and know that what you want in your life isn't a compulsion and a thing that you have to do and you need to do it. It's a thing that is a genuine, true choice. And I think meditation allows you to make more true choices.
Nope. I doubled down on meditation. It's been super impactful. Like you were saying, just to tell your brain, no, we're going to sit. We're just going to sit. We're going to let the mind wander and do its thing, but we're not going to act or just kind of do this thing that we always feel we need to be in movement. Is really
Exactly. Running
powerful.
on like the unconscious programming, the habits.
Mm. So the next question for you, Chimney, is if you could create one law or policy that everyone need to abide by, what would that be?
I would not do it because I think all of suffering comes from thinking we know what's better for other people. And if they
Mm.
just did it how we did
Ooh,
it, it would be better. And I think God did it right by giving us free will.
I
So I'm pro
love it.
God, very pro life.
Love it, love it, love it, love it. Okay, so then, all right. Hopefully, this next one you're down for, which is when it comes to this season, we're all talking about self love and relationships. So, what is one lesson about love that you needed to learn in order to become who you are today?
I still don't have an answer to that question. Because you gave me a little hint about what these questions would be. So I've been sitting with that one. Um, but I think it is something along the lines of like love being all around us. And if I'm not feeling love, it's because there was some wise reason that I sort of pushed it away. But a lot of my healing has just been like awakening and enlightening and the realization that like, oh, love is right here. Like I don't have to go running around for it. I don't have to search for it. It's not over there somewhere. It's not after I get a million subscribers. It's not after I get my next client. It's right here.
Yeah, and that's a part of the hero's journey, right? We all think it's
That's it.
outside of us, but we have it.
Mm-hmm.
We have it cultivated right in. So it's like we don't
It's
need
right
to
here.
outsource it.
Yeah.
So, well, Chimney, with that said, where can people go to learn more about you? But also, what's up next for you, and where can they go to learn more about your offerings, especially if they want to get involved in your coaching?
Yeah, so you can definitely check out my Instagram. It's coaching by Chimdi. And honestly, I am just really focused on continuing to heal, knowing that as I heal, the opportunities will just start flowing in. So some of the coolest stuff I've gotten to do have not been things that I've planned, whether it's like got to do this commercial and a web series and I shot a reality show and all these like random ass things, voiceover work, all these really cool creative things. I have not searched for them. I've been minding my business and they've just dropped in. So truly hang out with me on my coaching page. I post on it more than I do my personal. And then, of course, on YouTube, I make videos every week. But truly, you know as much as I do about what's coming up, you and God. So I'm just looking to see what God's got for me, and I'll keep y'all updated on the YouTube.
Well, we'll continue, Chimney, to watch your amazing show and your story and your journey unfold. And nothing much but more to say besides just appreciation and thank you again for just showing us all the blueprint to living in purpose. Even if you don't got it all figured out, as we get to go on your journey, it's really insightful to be like, okay, healing is possible. It's okay to step into vulnerability and expressing emotions. It's also okay to leaning to these passions where the world might not think this is the path I should go, but my heart and my soul, this is what speaks to it, and I need to follow it. So I just once again love that you're reframing that to people out there to listen to that.
You're so welcome. And I really appreciate you for giving me this opportunity to connect and to, yeah, share the gospel, share the good news of Jesus Christ.
Mm,
This we need to reframe sharing the good news with like just being real sexy and cursing a lot and like, great news. So yeah, thank you for the opportunity.
yes. Well, folks, I'll be sure to add everything that Jimmy has shared in the show notes, but I want to say that's it for today's show. I'd like to thank you again for your presence and tuning in. If you enjoyed this show, please be sure to show your support by sharing the Living Once Twice podcast on LinkedIn, Instagram, or wherever, leaving us a review on Spotify, iTunes, and also YouTube, and follow us again at Living Once Twice. Reaching out to you all through the time and the space that separates us to say, remember, your dream life is waiting for you. It's time to go for it. You deserve it. Catch you later on Living Once Twice.